do you have a scariest part of performing for yourself? What's scary about everything?
So I have heard people say that the scariest part is just the beginning, when they call your name and the 10 seconds it takes you to actually get to the microphone. For me, the scariest part is not that. The scariest part is at the other end when you're in the midst of telling a story and you're really vibing with the audience and they're laughing at all the right parts and they're really caring about where you're going. And then the judge in the front row says, and you have 1 minute left. And all of a sudden you think, I'm never going to finish my story in 1 minute. I'm going to get disqualified. And then when the panic sets in, I want to start talking really quickly. And that doesn't behoove you at all. So for me, it's definitely when we're winding up down and we're getting to the other end and it's all feeling really good. And then the judge reminds you that this is a competition and you have 60 seconds left. At that beginning end where you're headed up to the microphone, I think it's for me, it is so exciting. And the fact that I get to share, I form these stories in my head and I practice them in my car. And I have very few people that I trust to listen to me ahead of time. And so that is the moment when you get to share your art, when you literally get to share your story. And that's the moment that makes it all worthwhile, is when that story finally gets to be shared with the audience and finally gets to come out of my head.
Right, for sure. And it's like so vulnerable. There's that moment of vulnerability, and excitement. There's probably so many emotions that flow through your head as you're trying to perform your art.
Absolutely. And that's one thing that I think we have in common with lots of other performing arts, is that I think when you see a public speaker, or you are giving a lecture or listening to a lecture, there's kind of a division between the people who are listening and the people who are speaking. But when you are doing something like storytelling or poetry, or honestly even comedy, and it comes from a very real place and it's something that has actually happened to you, regardless of whether the story arc is funny or the story arc is sad, you are making yourself vulnerable and the audience can feel that and appreciate that. And then they give that back to you. And I have made some really fast friends over, a couple of stories that you feel the need to tell someone that you connected with them, or that you were happy you heard their story, you were lucky to be there that night. And we don't walk up to strangers and say, oh, I'm so glad we ate in the same restaurant, but you spend 5 minutes telling somebody a story and they feel compelled to tell you that they felt that connection, and then you're Facebook friends.
Now, Amanda Gorman, we all know how viral she went this past month at Inauguration Day when she captivated like the entire US with The Hill We Climb. Do you yourself, and this is kind of switching gears just a little bit from storytelling to more poetry, do you have a favorite poet or a favorite poem?
Whew. I was actually unprepared for that question. I I got into poetry actually much, much later than I got into storytelling, like decades later. I have a teenage daughter who really benefits from being able to write poetry and perform and put those words on paper. So I started my venture into poetry for her. So it hasn't been many years, but I've always enjoyed poetry, listening to poetry. But poets span, lifetimes and generations and hundreds of years. So I can't say that I have a favorite one, but I can say that this past weekend on an adventure in the Adirondack woods while snowshoeing, I stopped in the middle of the road and there were two roads that diverged in the wood. And that was the first thing I thought. So I know it's really well known and I know that lots of people love it and lots of people use it. But the fact of the matter is that that's what happens when you have words in your head. Is I was trying to decide, do I go left or do I go right, and then a poem pops into your head, or a line of a poem pops into your head. Um, but if I had to choose a poet, I would probably choose E. E. Cummings, and I think that there's something very humble and something very emotional, to use the word that you had used before, that those poems just kind of span the gamut and feed really well into whatever is going on with you at that point in time. They feel very differently depending on the type of day you're having or the mindset that you have. One of my favorite quotes in the whole world is, you can never go back and read the same story twice, because the story doesn't change, but you do. And that's how I feel about that poetry, and poetry in general, but definitely those poems.
Let's say someone is interested in going into poetry or going into spoken word, or just wanting to explore, let's say a young person, or even really anyone at any age in their life. What would be some words of encouragement or some advice that you would give someone who's interested in the field?
It probably will sound very similar to the advice that all artists give, other budding artists, but I the most important thing that I could tell anyone would be that everyone is nervous to start out with, and you just have to go for it. You have to jump in both feet first. You can't really temper yourself and think, I'm going to practice this story on my family and then maybe a slightly larger audience. And then, it life doesn't work out that way. I have, even after I had won competitions and had been doing it for years, I have gotten in front of a microphone and completely forgotten what I was going to say. And your time is running it, and I can't even remember the first word anymore. It happens to everyone, and the audience will appreciate what you give them, no matter what that is. No matter how long or short it is, no matter how well crafted it is or isn't, no matter what it sounds like, the audience will be appreciative of the fact that you have given that to them. So I wouldn't recommend it for all things in life, but for poetry or storytelling, I would definitely recommend practice. Know you're going to be nervous, but jump in with both feet.
I am from a very small family. I've only recently realized what it's like to be from a large family. And so, to those of you who are from a large family, I would like to say, I'm so sorry. One of the many benefits of being from a small family is that I got my grandparents for every single holiday. There was no packing, there was no planning, there was no packing into my mom's station wagon, there was no over the river and through the woods. I got up on the holiday mornings, stayed in my pajamas, watched TV, and waited for my grandparents to arrive. It was awesome. When my grandparents pulled in, my sister and I would stumble over each other to get to the door yelling, Nana, Papa, Nana, Papa, which I realize now as an adult is exceedingly annoying. And even though we were excited to see our grandparents, what we really wanted on the holidays was the picnic basket. My grandmother had this wooden weaved picnic basket that opened both sides to the middle. No one was allowed to touch the picnic basket except my grandmother and my grandfather when she let him. For years, I thought my grandfather's job was to carry the picnic basket from the house to the car and back again. My mom was not a great cook. Sorry, Mom. And so my grandmother's job was to bring that picnic basket full of all of the food that makes the holidays the holidays. My grandfather would set it down on the table, and my grandmother would open one side, and out would come Pyrex dishes full of homemade pickles, 2 kinds of sweet potatoes, candied yams, and always a mason jar full of some mysterious white liquid that somehow transformed turkey drippings into the world's best turkey gravy. That basket was like Mary Poppins' bag. No matter how many Pyrex dishes she pulled out of it, you knew there were more in the bottom, because nestled in the bottom were the pies. Every holiday, regardless of which one it was, I knew that there was a perfect lemon meringue pie sitting in the bottom of that picnic basket just for me. Now, in order to understand the rest of this story, you need to know a little something about my grandfather. Like many North Country men that I know, he didn't speak much. As a matter of fact, I heard him say 2 phrases from the time I was born till the time I left for college. When you would find an insect outside and bring it to him, he would say, "Oh my." And when you woke up in the morning from spending the night and you said, "Papa, can I have pancakes for breakfast?" he would say, "Let's just see about that." And that was all. So after my grandmother unloaded the basket to her content, she would go in the living room to visit with my father. My grandfather, that was his cue. He would wink, nod, point at the basket, and lift up one side, just enough so that you could get close and peer in. And as soon as your nose got close enough that he could catch it, he would let go and slam the lid shut. It's like that scene in Pretty Woman with the necklace and when she tries to reach for it and he closes the box on her fingers. I never got tired of that game, and he never once actually caught my nose. At the end of a meal, it was like the loaves and the fishes. That dinner became a refrigerator full of leftovers and a picnic basket full of packed Pyrex dishes, also containing leftovers. And out would go my grandfather, picnic basket on one arm, grandmother on the other. My grandfather was the light of my life. I loved him very much. He was my best friend. As often happens, the picnic basket got misplaced. I never became the cook that my grandmother was, and so my picnic basket was actually 2 plastic grocery bags full of food from the bakery. My grandfather didn't live to see me graduate from college. He didn't live to see me get married or have kids, and he didn't live to see my marriage fall apart. That was a hard Christmas. When my girls and I decided to head out on our own, we had enough money for a tree, but we weren't allowed to take our Christmas ornaments. No baby's first Christmas. No reindeer antlers made with finger paint in kindergarten. And I couldn't afford to buy new ornaments. So I sent a message out to all of my friends, pleading with them that if they had extra ornaments, could we please borrow them just for one Christmas? The next day I came home, and sitting on the front steps, miraculously, had appeared my grandmother's picnic basket. Inside was a note from a woman I had not spoken to in many years. She said she had brought in ornaments, and she was afraid they would break. So she dug in my garage until she found the picnic basket and put them inside so they'd be safe. Just like all those food items all those years ago, as we started to hang the ornaments on the tree, we realized there were far more ornaments than that basket should have held. That year, my 7-year-old wanted one thing for Christmas. She wanted a kitten. And my landlord had decreed we could not have pets. Christmas morning came, and I knew I would have a very disappointed 7-year-old. After the presents were opened, no one had told her that the basket shoved in the back wasn't actually a gift, and she pulled it out. As she reached for it, one side of the lid popped up, and as her fingers got closer, it snapped back down. At first, I thought I must be seeing things. But after the 4th or 5th time that she giggled because it kept snapping on her fingers, completely unbidden and outside of my own free will, I said, "Oh my, let's just see about that." We opened up one side, and out crawled a tiny tiger kitten. Somehow, with the help of my mother and the magic Christmas basket, that letter had gotten waylaid on its way to the North Pole and ended up in my landlord's mailbox. I realized that that basket is full of Christmas magic, but I realized something more that day. On that holiday, regardless of what comes out of the basket, because of it, we are all full of love.